right, good morning, everyone. As we ran just about a minute over time there on our previous meeting, so thank you for bearing with us here while everyone's joining.
Dan, it looks like we have everybody on the line.
Yeah, looks like everyone is here. Hoping to see Mike with the call-in information. Make sure he's got it, folks. Just to sort of explain, Mike Rakowski, our project manager here on our side, power went out in his house about a minute before our last focus group meeting, so he'll be calling in. Hopefully he gets his power restored here quickly. So, but he'll be calling in and joining us, and I'll be kind of manning the slides as we go through. So, all right. I will go ahead and get the screen share going here. Can everybody see the screen here?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. And sorry, just getting everything set up. All right. So Mike will be calling in momentarily here, but in the meantime, can go ahead and get us started on the meeting. So first of all, thank you all for joining us. My name is Dan Hemme. I'm a transportation planner here with Stantec. We've been working with the city, as I think most, if not all of you, are now well aware of, on this complete street study of 15th Street. We are, sort of in the process of this design shred, this project shred. We're in day 2 of day 3, and as part of that, we're conducting these focus groups to get drill down a little bit more into the corridor and understand some targeted issues and get some more specific feedback on what are the challenges and what are the opportunities. All right, Mike has I see Mike has joined us, so. I will, Mike, I'm just going to run through the Zoom controls here, just make sure we're well aware, and then you can take it away. How does that sound?
Actually, let's do what you did before and kind of go through the context and stuff, and we'll hand it over after everybody introduces themselves. That'd be great.
All right.
I'm still without video here.
Okay. I was about to say, I wasn't sure if you'd gotten power back yet or not. So, all right. So at any point, in that case, we'll go through this and then just a short little walkthrough of where we're at, go through some introductions, and then we'll get moving. So I think most, if not all of us, now have at least some level of familiarity with Zoom calls or virtual meetings at this point, but just so everyone's aware, your controls for this meeting are along that bottom bar there. So you can mute yourself, unmute yourself, stop and start your video, depending on your needs there in the left corner. You can view participants there at the bottom, see who else is attending, and open the chat box there. That chat box is an opportunity to provide some comments or feedbacks. We've got a small party here today by design. And so we really want to encourage open dialogue. So whether you're comfortable just talking about issues out in the open, or whether you want to put them in the chat box and engage in some feedback there, whatever you feel most comfortable doing. Noting if you do have any sort of issues with video or audio during this, check your browser. It may be that it's not optimized for working with Zoom. We found that Google Chrome works best, but at this point, I believe Zoom has worked out all the issues with the different browsers. And then just as a final note, we are recording this meeting so that we can have the full extent of our notes on this. It helps us go back and review, and I think they may end up getting posted to the city website at some point. But noting that because we're recording this, any of the private conversations, that chat box gets picked up. We won't be publishing those private chats, but just sort of as an acknowledgement that it'll be happening. So just sort of be mindful of that. So without further ado, just really quickly, sort of introducing the project team here. We've got a lot of us on the call today. From the city side, Jonathan and Aaron have really been leading things and taking us through really what has been a fantastic public engagement process. This is just one piece of it, these focus group meetings that we're conducting during the charrette. you may have responded to a survey or added some points to our interactive web map, or maybe by show of hands, those of you that attended the public symposium back in the end of January. Yeah, lots of hands went up. We've seen there were over 400 responses to the survey, well over 200 comments left on the map. All in all, I believe we're looking at close to 1,000 unique interactions and points of public engagement in this process, which we're looking at 10 to 15% of the town that's been able to contribute, which is truly astounding, especially for a community of Washington size. So really hats off to Jonathan and to Aaron and to Barikia, who's also on the call, for really motivating the town and getting the involvement. It's really been just an absolute joy to work on. From our side, fearless leader Mike there, who again is enjoying his unfortunately a power outage, has been our project manager, our complete streets guru, and really guiding us through this process and helping to deliver on the sort of the challenges, the opportunities, and the designs that we're seeing here. I've already mentioned I'm Dan, transportation planner on the project. I live just down the road in Greenville and spend a good amount of time in Washington. Actually, yesterday morning, had to get over and snap a quick picture and grabbed a coffee at Rachel K's on the way back. But ride my bike through, I'm very familiar with 15th Street and really am looking forward to the sort of the vision that results in this as someone who, even though I don't live in Washington, I nonetheless participate in the community. And then also joining us on the call is Amber, our urban designer, and who's been doing a lot of the rendering work that you've seen if you've attended our pinup sessions. Just been a fantastic working part of the team. So many other planners and engineers working on the charrette as part of this process and as we go through, but really sort of to give you a picture of who the core team is that's been working on this. So as I noted, we've done some work here already. If you look, we're kind of in the second half of the project now, right? If you think about it from a sports metaphor, you've got the first half and the second half. We're into the second half now of this project, and so here what we're looking at is again that design of the corridor. We've engaged in a lot of the data. We've done a lot of the investigation, trying to understand what's going on 15th Street. What are the challenges here? And we know that there's a big safety issue on the corridor. There's a complete lack of bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and in general, it just needs to be something that works better for residents, for businesses, and for all members of the community. There is a lot happening on 15th Street, and 15th Street is trying to service a lot of different people, groups, and land uses, and that's a real challenge. And so all that, we drag all that down and put it into and try and condense it in designs here during this 3-day charrette. All of our planners, all of our designers engaged in trying to take all that data and turn it into a workable design, and then to get feedback. And that's what these focus groups and that's what our evening pinup sessions are about, is getting feedback from you on the day's designs, on the work that's been done so far, to say, hey, this is what's working, this is what really does not look good, and we turn that around, both those positives and those negatives, and keep working to refine that concept. And the goal is that at the end of this 3-day workshop, we've got a really good rough design for 15th Street. We'll come back after this and refine it, working with Aaron and Jonathan and the city to really hone in on the sort of the details and give it something that's both acceptable to the DOT and really is supported by the community. That was the challenge of the previous design, was a design that wasn't supported and wasn't accepted, and that's ultimately what we're trying to produce here. Something that you may not get to see everything that you want in this corridor. It's a real challenge to fit it all in when you're dealing with so many different uses. But if you've seen the process, if you've engaged in all the different considerations, we reach a place of, as Mike calls it, informed consent. May not get everything, but if you can walk away with 50–60% of it, that's a design I can get behind. Moving along. Just want to sort of go around the room here really fast and just kind of say, what's your name? Who are you here? What's your interest in 15th Street? And maybe just very briefly, what do you see as the challenges on 15th Street, and what are you hoping to see? What are you hoping to get out of this at the end of the design? So Ned, you are in the top right corner there. If Aaron and I are at the top, you're in the top right corner of my screen. So I'm going to pick on you to go first. If you could sort of introduce yourself.
Hi, Ned Hulbert, 1232 North Market Street. I think what I'm interested in is seeing the 15th Street redesign make all the neighborhoods more livable. Right now, they're kind of cut off from each other in some ways by 15th Street, which also encourages side traffic down some of the streets in the neighborhoods. So anything we can do to connect the neighborhoods better and connect them more easily to the business entities along 15th, so you don't have to ride your car, but you can bike or walk. That would be great.
Yeah. All right. Polk, got you coming up next.
Good. Polk Culpepper, 1301 Summit. I live just about 2 blocks south of 15th Street. And I think my main consideration, I understand that there's a need for greater safety on 15th Street. But I hope that we don't put that as the number one priority over everything else. There are a lot of other considerations people in the neighborhood have. Ned just mentioned a couple of them. And while safety, of course, is important, there's also the way the street's going to look, the aesthetics of it, improving a way for people to use vehicles other than automobiles or trucks to get up and down. And I know that the Department of Transportation is maybe rightly concerned with efficiency of getting people from one place to another. But I hope that that doesn't become overriding consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I speak for our whole team. When we think of safety, and safety is such an important priority in projects, but I think we like to think of safety as safety for all users. If you think about safety just for cars, it's currently not a safe corridor. We've got a crash rate 1.4 times that of the state average, and so it's an unsafe corridor even for road users. But I think with the complete lack of bicycle and pedestrian facilities, it's certainly something that's been pointed out. The highest point of dissatisfaction on our survey was pedestrian safety crossing 15th Street. 84% of respondents said they felt very unsafe. And so that's, we look at that lack of multimodal facilities and say that there's a community of people, 20% of renters on this corridor don't have access to a car. How are they getting around? They're walking, they're biking, they're carpooling. And so they're put in an inherently unsafe situation when those facilities don't exist for them. So I would only push back a little bit on your point about safety, if only to say that we're thinking about safety in a holistic context for all users. Complete Streets is an approach that considers all users and all modes, not just cars. And in doing so, we're thinking about the full community context. And that does include things like aesthetics and street trees and streetscaping and the appearance of the road, but it very much so considers that safety as well. So
I agree.
All right, Laura, you are next.
Hi, I'm Laura Bliley, and I live at 1207 Summit. And really the same things other people have said, and just really emphasizing that this is primarily a neighborhood street, this was never supposed to be the bypass or the through street from the points of either side of Washington. We've got 264 that was intended to be used that way. And I'm having right around me a lot of excitement about the people that are moving into our neighborhood. And so I think we'll have even more people move into the neighborhood, which will help whenever they're assessing for businesses coming to town, when 15th Street is a beautiful street. And because when they do assessments for improving the town, I think they do a 10-mile radius So it needs to reach farther than just looking at the downtown area, but also needs to look at this area and all the improvements that we can have here. So I'm excited, especially, and also, there are a lot of pedestrians that go up and down the street. You can see where the grass is worn down from people walking, and they need to be safe.
Yeah,
But
yeah, absolutely. You see those, I think we call them desire lines or desire paths. It's where people are walking, even though those facilities don't exist. And, we heard through public feedback, people like to go walk at the Oakdale Cemetery, but they can't cross the street. It's one of the most challenging things, whether it's at Bonner Street for people who are cycling, who travel up Bonner, but then try to cross at Market, whether it's at Market Street or elsewhere in the community. It's a challenge. It's a challenge to do that. And so that's certainly something that, we're hoping through our design here that we're going to be able to address. And I know, rather, I should say that we are addressing, hopefully to the satisfaction both of the town and the DOT. So, Grace, you are up next. You are on mute.
My name is Grace Lexon. I live at 924 North Market. I have lived in this neighborhood, Nicholsonville, most of my life, if not all minus about 10 years, probably in other places. I lived on 13th Street prior to that and lived at 1232 North Market as a child. So I've been here a long time. I remember 15th Street as just another neighborhood street where we rode our bikes and crossed back and forth and played with the kids on the other side. And I would like to see it return to something a little bit more like that. I know it can't go back to a dirt road where we played, but I love what I saw last night in the pinup. I think it looks wonderful and appealing and would be really good for the businesses in the area to have it look more like that and be a place where people would like to go and hang out. Pedestrian safety. I walk in the cemetery. My husband and I bike. We cross 15th when we bike. It's always a little hairy. So all of those things matter to me. And I think 15th Street, its design will impact the Market Street corridor, and the traffic that goes through there could be in a good or a bad way. And I would like to see what's happening, make it a good way, a good impact on our neighborhood, and help to preserve the historic quality of the area that most of us live in. And I would also add that there's a huge amount of the population of Washington that lives in that. I don't remember the numbers exactly, but in the area around 15th Street, it's really, I wanted to say it's maybe a quarter to a third of the town's population lives in that area. So.
Yeah, no, it's, that's one of the, being a small town, you've got a lot of people in a smaller area. And so that's certainly the case. And especially when you've got a street as important as 15th Street. So your point about the dirt road is and about the development of 5th Street and not being able to necessarily go back is a good one, because, it used to be a dirt road and then the DOT just came in and added lanes. And so, it's a challenge to sort of turn that back around. But what we can do is we can look at ways to better balance all the different users and uses along that corridor, because you're right, it is, particularly when you get away from Washington Square Mall, it's a residential street. There's houses on both sides, and there are neighborhoods on either side of the street in those side streets. And so that's certainly something that we are that we're looking at and taking into account. All right, Vanessa, you're up next.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vanessa Dunn, and I'm here today representing two aspects. Number one is Washington Housing Authority. I'm the executive director here, and just here on behalf of residents that live in close proximity to 15th Street, specifically the Oakcrest community, where they are often and probably make up 10 to 15% of that 20% number that you quoted earlier as having no transportation. And so watching them trying to get back and forth from the local food lion, the Dollar Tree or whatever, with shopping carts and carrying their bags along those worn pathways in the grass and no crosswalks when they're trying to cross that street, especially in high peak traffic times as far as lunch hour, evening traffic. It could get hairy and scary watching them trying to navigate that. The other reason I'm here is because I actually live on 15th Street. My address is 400 West 15th, and that is the corner of Van Norden and 15th. And getting out of my driveway in the morning can be a huge challenge. Me and my daughter talk all the time that you have to risk it all to make that left turn to get onto 15th Street in the morning. And so I would love, coming from a metropolitan area, I would love to see crosswalks, sidewalks, things of that nature that, promote pedestrian safety. I myself live less than a mile from my job, but I can't walk because it's just not safe to do so. And that would, a day like today, it would have been lovely to have that option. So I'm just hoping to see, some major upgrades.
Yeah. Two things. One, I am absolutely putting that quote down about risking it all to make a left. That's Mike's already going to tell me to memorialize that comment. So I'm just going to write it in as soon as I can here. I got multiple screens sharing at the same time. The second being, if you're living right at the corner of Van Norden and 15th, and you'll see when we share our preferred access plan, that's an intersection that we identified for creating a mid-block crossing, if you will. Since there's not a traffic light there, we call it a mid-block, but
right.
It was actually a rendering that we put up. I don't know if you were able to attend last night's pinup session, but we've actually suggested a crosswalk right there at that intersection.
Okay.
So, with a refuge island. So
sounds good.
All right. So and I see a smiling face down there from Mike. It looks like he's gotten his power back. So good to see you again, Mike. Got a couple more folks here. Michael, if you could, I guess you'd be next up, and then we'll be able to get right into it. I guess I should say Michael Tahaney. Did I pronounce your last name right? Michael, you may be on mute.
Sorry. Yes, you did pronounce that correctly. Oh gosh, sorry. I turned my. There we go. Now we're operational. Yes, it's Michael Tahaney, and I live at 111 West 11th Street, which is a couple of blocks off of the 15th Street corridor there. And I really would like to echo a lot of what I'm hearing today, being down in the list here. Vanessa's comments were spot on. I travel this a lot because this is the route I go. I work in Greenville, and I commute back and forth and shop at the Washington Mall area all the time. And I've witnessed all of those things that Vanessa was talking about, and I white knuckle it myself just watching some of the pedestrian traffic that try to fight all of that. Well, just nothing that exists there, especially if you're headed toward, like Greenville from the hospital area. There's just nothing there, and there's a lot of activity there that just terrifies me to even watch people trying to do that. Mothers with children and baby carriages and all, it's awful. So I'm thrilled that we're doing this. Safety obviously is a priority for me. I guess I do have a question. What happens because it's clear now, I've only been here almost 10 years. I've lived in my home here, and I moved here from Greenville. But I'm trying to figure out what will happen if this no longer becomes the quick thoroughfare that now we've all sort of come to know it as, or use it as this dividing kind of a corridor that's just a quick zip, through town, because 264 is usually a mess. And so I don't quite understand why that, which is supposed to be the bypass traffic, is actually more congested than 15th Street is. I'm just kind of curious, like, if we do defer this from being a cut-through street, what's going to happen to traffic on 264? Just a question. I don't know if that's being considered. Bike and walk paths are priority for me. Yes, it's ugly. In and out of Washington Square Mall area is a harrowing experience for many people, and people are still making lefts out of those places that say no lefts unless you're at the light. I watch that all the time, and I do agree that I think we can create a bustling kind of commercial and business center that is on this side of town that's different than the downtown business corridor, which is more walking and, you know, kind of cute shops and stuff. We do have more commercial kinds of business on this end, and it's extremely not pleasing to be in those areas. So I'm really hoping that market can turn into, or the market and 15 intersection can be safe and sort of create more of a neighborhood feel, because it really does feel like a dividing street. As long as I've been here, it just feels like there's everything on this side and then there's a no man's land on the other side, and there is no connection between communities. So those are my vested interests.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you know, I think, you know, we're, you know, thinking about how that traffic splits off. That's obviously something that, you know, is something that's being considered. And I think sort of as to your other points, you know, connecting neighborhoods, you know, again, being able to cross 15th Street, you know, it touches on multiple things, you know, being able to connect those communities across the two of them, but also being able to provide safety, as you're talking about. But you know, with that in mind, because I want to be sort of respectful of everybody's time as we're going here, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and we can, you know, whether you want to go through sort of a bit more of a sort of an understanding of where we're at already with the project, or just launching into questions.
Sure, that sounds good. So can you hear me?
Scan.
Awesome. Good to see everybody's smiling faces. Did we hear from Grace? I wanted to make sure. I apologize. I had technical difficulties signing up. I had to re-trigger all my breakers in the entire house like 3 minutes before the previous focus group discussion. So it's terrible. Did we hear from everybody? Aaron, do you know? Okay.
We did.
Awesome. It's good to see some familiar faces. Ned, welcome back. Vanessa, I did hear, I came in when you were talking as well, and the affordable housing thing too. It's interesting because let me give you a little bit of background. We're hosting 6 focus group discussions. So we've already talked to emergency services, fire, rescue, police. We learned from them a lot of the design limitations and considerations. You know, they got a 40 foot long tractor ladder truck that we need to adhere to and stuff like that. So we understand what they're dealing with. But there are some overlapping things, and it's good to reinforce what we hear. I think, Michael, you brought up a couple things too, Ned, and in that even from the I guess the police chief, Chief Drakeford, he had mentioned, you know, safety is paramount. Obviously, you heard the unfortunate comparison where 140% of that of a similar road in North Carolina, which is not where you want to be in terms of crashes. And the most prevalent ticket holders are those that are running red lights and speeding along 15th Street. So not a big shocker. I see everybody nodding their heads. So, you know, making this, Michael, I don't want to, I like what you brought up. We're not here to compete with the downtown or 5th Street, although we are trying to complement, right? And every street, and I always tell folks in our community, every street in your downtown, including 15th, every street in every community needs to put the pedestrian first. If you do not put pedestrians first, you do not have a downtown. You do not have a livable street. So I like someone's analogy about, I think, Ned, you brought it up, of connecting the neighborhoods back into the street, but giving them a reason to be there, right? Right now, no one wants to be there because there's no bicycle pedestrian amenities. There's no pedestrian lighting. There's no way to get across the road. And mind you, that was the #1 issue that people brought up, was just the simple premise of crossing the road. So Vanessa, when you brought up things like affordable housing, the things that we don't really think of every single day, except for you, that's your authority. We want to look at the public investment and realize the private reinvestment along this corridor. We are very excited because in and by itself, 15th Street is doing a lot for a lot of different people. People live, work, and play along here. You have commercial, you have retail, you have office, you have medical clinics, you got the hospital, you got the shopping, you got a grocery store, tractor supply, you name it. It's doing everything for everyone. And that's really a great demand for a corridor, but really limits what we can do for everyone. So there's going to be trade-offs here. So we have, as Dan alluded to over here, we've just been talking with different folks and trying to better understand. So I'm liking what we're hearing. Yes, our premise moving forward, based on what we've heard for the past 3 or 4 months, is that we're going to slow down people. Yes, someone mentioned before, I don't know who it was, is that safety is okay, but there's other priorities like beautification. I'm going to challenge that too. Safety is paramount. If you don't feel safe on a road, you will not use it. Or it's like Michael said, it's going to be white knuckle driving, or you're never going to be walking on it or riding a bike. And God forbid the folks, I feel for them, that are 88, that are disabled, that don't have a vehicle, right, Vanessa? Those homes along there, I think there's 19% of your rental market don't have a vehicle in their household. So they have to walk and they have to ride a bike to do all of their trips. And so our promise to you is a couple things in terms of design. I'm an engineer and planner, so let's frame this out, right? Safety is paramount. The multimodal is also very important. Get people across the road, get them through the road. And then last but not least, we will try to address safe passage through traffic and congestion relief. And then our design limitation, we're trying to stay within the existing right-of-way, and that's paramount. We're not trying to close down anybody's driveway. We're not trying to encroach upon their private property. Unless it's at an intersection where we're trying to put in a left turn. I want to be full open disclosure and transparent. We maybe take a little bit of property at intersections, but for the most part, we're trying to stay with that 60-foot boundary. And I think we can do it based on what we presented last night of repurposing some of that asphalt and some of that area in order to give back to people for pedestrian and bicycle. Even lighting is important too. So lots of stuff I threw at you, but that's our promise. That's our commitment to you, because I think that's going to appease a lot more people. Are we going to make everybody happy? No, that's what Dan alluded to earlier. We know we're not going to do that, but that's not our premise. But we are trying to make it safer for all users, as well as give treatments, the basic necessity for treatments. Once we put in that public investment, we hope that it turns in private reinvestment in redevelopment. You know, I pick on Washington Plaza. That's adjacent to the Tractor Supply, not the same plaza, but the one that's over there, you know, the one that's empty parking lot and really has turned over a multitude of times, probably not the highest and best uses. We totally expect something like that would be redeveloped over the next 10 or 15 years if we were to put in a better streetscape, better bicycle pedestrian amenities. So we're going to show and play a little bit of what if. So Vanessa, when you talk about affordable housing, we are looking at increasing, or maybe even looking at apartments. The Economic Development and Chamber of Commerce folks said there's a big demand for that. It may not be on the frontage. You don't want to necessarily put that on the frontage of 15th Street, but it may be in back of it. There's a lot of land, vacant land in back of Tractor Supply, in back of Washington Plaza, that we can connect up and build kind of a transition going from retail, commercial, maybe even industrial on the frontage of 15th Street, and then phasing back to more apartment lifestyle or multifamily at least. Clean it up and make it affordable for service workers as well. And I think that's important. So I'm going to stop talking there. Dan, did you want to kind of walk through a little bit of the corridor and well, not the corridor, some of the things we presented last night?
Yeah. Sure. Oh, you know what? Yeah, we'll go. Pull back up. So here's just to give you guys a look at what we've been working on over and some of this, you know, was done in sort of in pre-preparation before the charrette, but what we've been working on over the last day and a half has been really in preparing sort of this concept for the corridor. And so we start everything from the preferred access plan, which really lays out, you know, at a conceptual level, how are people going to interact with the corridor? What are the intersections that are really important? What are the areas where people need to be able to have the ability to cross the corridor? What are the safest places for people to cross the corridor? And so this really sort of encapsulates all of that. You know, the design, the treatments may change, but everything will still reflect this base concept of you know, how are people accessing and using the corridor? And so we look at things like Market Street, you know, is highlighted as what we call, well, that wasn't supposed to, as a high quality intersection, right? And so that's somewhere where we're going to be looking at, you know, putting in things like mast arm signals, you know, for you know, traffic lights, for pedestrian countdowns and high visibility crosswalks at the intersection so people can cross. If there's a median coming up to the intersection, we'll look at having a pedestrian refuge island there to give people the ability to cross and have safe passage there. Other locations, like you'll see here over at the cemetery, and again, I'm calling out Van Norden Street there, Vanessa, that's a mid-block crossing. So even though there's not a signal there, these are locations that are intended to be able to give people the ability to cross the intersection. And you'll see that those two are in key locations, and they're in that purple circle, right, that's labeled as a walk shed. And you can see by putting them there, we're creating these overlapping areas in these walk sheds. What those represent is that if you are within that circle, you are within a short walk to be able to have a safe pedestrian, whether it's pedestrian or bicycle or by any other means, safe passage crossing that corridor. At just the current signalized intersections at Brown Street, at Market Street, at Minuteman, there'd be gaps right around Van Norden and right around the cemetery there, two places where people need to and want to be crossing the corridor. And so by putting those mid-block crossings in there, we're ensuring that people are able to get to a safe location where they can cross the street quickly, all up and down the corridor. There's a continuous, uninterrupted opportunity for people to cross within 60 to 90 seconds, which is really what you're looking for a corridor like 15th Street. So, and then zooming in a little bit closer, we started laying out ideas for a shared use path along the north side of the corridor. And then those faint green bars that you might be seeing there, those are areas for pocketed medians, looking for ways to improve the safety and the operations of the corridor by introducing that center turn lane, providing opportunities for people to continue using that through lane to drive so that there's not, because again, turning crashes are one of the big concerns here along the corridor from people who just stop in the middle of the roadway to be able to make a left-hand turn. And then also providing the ability, if people aren't going to cross at those intersections, they again have that median in the middle where they can at least feel some degree of safety in doing so. And so these high quality intersections, then that is what we start to go in and try to produce some renderings and some redesigns for to help visualize, what is a high quality intersection or what does a mid-block crossing look like in practice. And so those are the things we started working on yesterday. And they're in various states of development. We've got Minuteman Lane here, there at the right in front of the Tractor Supply. And so looking at, what does a center median, what does a planted center median look like? What does it look like to have a shared use path on the north side of the roadway? What does it look like, in the context of maybe inviting some better private redevelopment?
You might want to zoom in a little bit, Dan. Zoom in on the before and then transition, because that's the hard thing to see.
Sure, not a problem. Yeah, I don't have context on how big the share screen is here, unfortunately. So definitely, this being what you guys see right now with the taqueria there, and having space, for bicycle, pedestrian, for sidewalks, and then this is
So and just to put the context, so keep it right there for a second.
Yep.
Just to help you visualize, and now this is Todd, because Ned, you had mentioned some questions before about right-of-way. We're not pushing the right-of-way back. We're not taking additional right-of-way. We're actually moving the outside curb and gutter in. It's 4 lanes right now. We're getting rid of one of those lanes by pulling in the outside curb so we can put in a protected bicycle side path or multi-use path, if you will. That way we cater to 8 to 80. Anybody that's, 8-year-old kid with a helmet that wants to ride their little bike, to a retiree that just wants to get out and stretch the legs and go from A to B. But when we do that, you can see, and we incorporate, now we'll go to the next page. This is just a segment that we're talking about putting in a protected plantable median because there's no curb cuts there. No one needs to take a left turn or a right turn in there and out of there. So you can see this is right in front of that Washington Plaza. That's the Mexican restaurant in the foreground there. But how awesome would that be, right? If you can zoom in a little bit, you got the side path that's going to be hopefully well used, but outside seating, some low level ambient lighting. And this is kind of just repurposing a building that's there, even keeping it in its context of what's there. They're still going to serve the same taco they do today. And so, but providing outside seating was one of the things that was missing along this corridor that a lot of people had expressed about. You have pedestrian level lighting with a nice banner there to kind of celebrate. When people see this, along with the physical verticality here with some street trees and the light, people are naturally going to slow down, just like they're doing on 5th Street. And so that's what we're trying to cater to. We're not trying to divert cars by any means, but we're trying to get them to slow down. Speed differential was the #1 thing by your chief of police. And honestly, 3 people have died in the past 10 years. That's 3 people way too many that were pedestrians or bicyclists along this corridor. And that's horrific stat to hold on to. I said enough about this one. Sorry about that, Dan.
No, not a
But you
problem
can
at
get
all.
a sense. And then the next one is just a mid-block treatment. We don't have to go into too much, but and I think Vanessa, you mentioned that you live right off
Is that
Van
you
Norden
here?
and stuff. Yeah, and so if you think about it, zoom into the before picture. When you think about it contextually, right? If you look in the foreground there, look how far back the nearest intersection is. Now, Vanessa, if you're walking down Van Norden, are you really going to walk 1,000 and 1,500 feet to the west to cross the road?
No, and no one
Exactly.
does. They could cross it anywhere they can.
Exactly. And so there's the effort. Thanks for being honest. But the reality is she's right. And so what we want to do, I remember Dan went through those walk sheds. We're trying to make it more predictable for folks to walk across. So this is a simple mid-block crossing. It doesn't mean we're putting in a new signal, but it does mean we're going to do some kind of actuation, either a rapid flashing beacon to let cars know, and this could be push button from a pedestrian or a kick button from a bicyclist to let people know that's driving that they need to stop and yield to the pedestrian to cross. Because that person right now, they're running across, you can call it jaywalking if you want to. I don't believe in that term, but people are running across the road unprotected. That's for certain. And so this is kind of what you're going to see. And this is an earlier rendering. We'll improve upon this later on today. We don't have a whole lot more than that, but I'm going to stop there and see if there's any kind of questions. At least you get a figure of what collectively the community is trying to achieve. And then at the end of the day, this is very important. The bottom aerial that Dan is showing, we're going to show you the physical footprint of the improvements, a plan view along the entire corridor. So you're going to be able to see where the 3-lane cross section is, where the 2-lane cross section is, where street trees are located, where the high quality intersection treatments and how are they going to look like high visibility crosswalks, pedestrian countdowns, mast arm signals, as well as gateway treatments. We're actually looking at Brown Street to redesign that and potentially look at that for a potential roundabout. As you can see down there, as we're zooming in, it's a horrific skewed intersection in a dead man's curve. And that was one of the high signal locations that Chief Drakeford had mentioned, that people are zipping through, trying to make the light and going right through the red light. And so all we're trying to do is clean that up a little bit and slow down cars. The good news about this is it's continuous. People can continue using this and flow. They're just going to go at a slower pace, but it's the #1 traffic calming device that you can put out there. And honestly, it takes care of a lot of those bad, horrible skews, the roads that come in. It's a 5-legged intersection, and to make it a little bit more predictable for folks. And lastly, it's a gateway. When people come into your section of 15th Street, we want them to realize that we're treating it a little bit differently, and you're going to see a lot more people on walking and on the bike. So I'll stop there. Are any questions? And later on today, you're actually going to see some of this corridor come to life and showing different features there. So I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions or any comments, things you'd like to see change. There you go, Laura.
All right, Laura.
Yeah, I like seeing that roundabout that you just showed, because there's entries in and out of O'Neill's drugstore and other things just right after the light. So you go in that curve, and people are wanting to scoot along and somebody's getting ready to stop and turn into a business. So that is real, I believe would be very helpful. And I like that image that you're going into a different kind of you're changing a venue, so to speak. Also with the crosswalks that are not at a light, they'll probably, I'm thinking, need to be a whole lot of education. I know that the crosswalks we have in Greenville near the hospital that are not associated with a traffic light, I don't think a good deal of the public understand that when a pedestrian is crossing there, I believe they have the right of way and traffic will go. And so I'm thinking there'll need to be a lot of education for people to understand if there's a pedestrian there wanting to cross, you need to stop and let them go across. But I guess, I don't know if that's part of your package.
That's a good point. And so we have, and I'm going to ask the question too. You guys can help design this as well. You have two ways of making folks, drivers, more aware of a crossing pedestrian out there, Laura. That's a great point. The one is what you're seeing here. And this is probably not drawn to scale, but it's called a rapid flashing beacon. So, and it would be actuated by a pedestrian pushing a button or someone on a bike pushing a button. And the flashers would go and it would just activate. And when people come to a stop, that pedestrian goes. The other method is called a hawk signal. I don't know if you recognize those, but a hawk signal is basically, and I think it's probably the bottom left hand. Yeah. A hawk signal is an actual signal. And so when that pedestrian pushes the button, it actually forces people to stop. It's actually stop light that forces people to stop. Much like you see in the bottom left-hand corner right there. It's an actual light that's controlled by pedestrians if they push the button. So what do you think? Keep in mind, this is going to be a 3-lane section now, not 4 lanes, but there's going to be a lot of traffic still on there, probably about 18,000 vehicles a day. Which one would you guys rather prefer and why? And anybody can answer that.
Are you asking which kind of signal?
Correct, Ned, correct. Yeah, which one do you think? And it really comes in the demographics too. It's probably not used, neither of those two devices. Someone correct me, Jonathan or Aaron. I don't know if any of those two devices are currently being used in Little Washington. And if not, yeah, Ned, that's a compelling question. Which one of these? Obviously, the rapid flashing beacons. Here's the trade-off. The rapid flashing beacons are cheap. They're cheaper. They're better than not having anything, and they just provide flashers to cars in order to stop. The hawk signal is more expensive, but it is an actual stop signal. It's a signal that is controlled by pedestrians. So which one do you think is more palatable and to understand and use in your community? Vanessa?
I think the hawk signal would be better, especially given Laura's point of people not fully understanding that when a pedestrian is there, they have the right of way and you're supposed to stop. So I think it would go a long way for safety.
Awesome.
I agree.
Okay. Anybody else want to share their thoughts? And honestly, when you are talking, you have traffic bonds that go from 13,000 up to 20,000. That's a lot of traffic. Michael?
I was just saying can there be a combination of one of these? Because it sounds like the one near Van Norden is the one that feels like it needs one of these, a hawk one, the harder ones, but that one further up doesn't, like near the cemetery, doesn't feel like you would need to stop traffic like completely for, I could be wrong, I don't know, but could there, in terms of how much, because there's just so much actual residential stuff that's going on down closer to the mall than there is over there. So do they all need to be one kind, or could it be done by,
A combination? Yeah. To answer your question, you're right. And you bring up some good points. So 2 things are working in your favor. I do like the hawk signal at Van Norden. I like it there because it's a 3-lane and it's actually at an intersection with left turning vehicles in all directions. And therefore it's a little bit more confusing. So maybe a hawk signal there, but I like your idea at the cemetery. That's actually the location where there's not an intersection, it's actually just a median, a planted median. So the pedestrian only has to look one way and the driver only has to look one direction in order for someone to cross. So maybe a rapid flashing beacon there to get people into the median, then they can get across. It's totally up to you guys, but I can see that as well. And there's less volume down near the cemetery as compared to up near Washington Square.
You're talking about cemetery, meaning at Bonner, not at Market. You're talking about Bonner Street.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
Well, so yes and no. The location of that mid-block crossing, as we've proposed it, is actually closer to the church, to the Assembly of God there. And part of the reason that it was brought up in the bike ped meeting yesterday is that the sight lines here, because this is on a curve for cars that are coming around the corner, they may come up on a pedestrian or a bicyclist crossing in a location like at Bonner and Nicholson, and not have much time to react. Whereas down at the Assembly of God there at the church, there's a little bit greater of a sight distance.
Well, there's a little problem with that, and which is that Bonner is the alternative parallel street when you're walking or biking, and you don't go down Market because it's busier. Bonner is less traveled and has no on-street parking for a lot of its length. And so that's the road where if you're going to the cemetery, and the cemetery entrance is right across the street from where Bonner empties into 15th. So it's like the continuous pathway from coming north on Bonner, you go right into the cemetery driveway, and then that's the exercise track. So putting that crossing further down away from the natural desire line is an issue. I'll just point that out. I like the Hawk because I know that the RFBs rely on drivers to control their own behavior,
Right.
And they have some problems. They're not seen by the pedestrian advocates. I mean, they're approved by traffic engineers, but they are seen as problematic by the active transportation community because they don't really protect vulnerable pedestrians in the same way that stopping traffic does. Yeah.
Yeah. So are you, Betsy, suggesting that hawk signal at both locations? And here's the benefit, and let me qualify. The distance between the two adjacent signals between Market and Brown Street is 2,800 feet. That's why we picked where we picked. It's the mid section between them, and it's at the most tangent of, when you zoom in of that corridor. Not to say that Bonner folks can't cross at Bonner, but there's no signal there, and you can't put that signal so close to Market.
Right.
And so if we do put in the hawk signal at this, right in front of the church there, right? We can do this. We can tie in the whatever signals that we have to create a progression control signal system. If it's a hawk signal, can't do that with a rapid flashing beacon. So maybe Betsy will understand, you probably understand that as a planner engineer. So because that makes that attractive if you're suggesting putting a hawk signal at the cemetery.
Yeah, I mean, I like the progressive signal idea. I didn't know that hawk signals could be tied into that.
Yeah.
What he's talking about, everybody, is that you can set the speed limit and then time the signals so that it's not advantageous to go faster than the speed limit. You're essentially letting people flow through as long as they are complying with the speed expectations, right? Because the signals are timed for that speed.
I would just add that my observation is that people drive faster in that section by the cemetery between Brown Street and Market. And well, actually between Brown Street and Respis, because there is less going on and
Yeah.
it feels more wide open. People speed down that part of the road. I would rather see a hard signal at that crossing too.
Good point. Good point. All right. So And again, we, as traffic engineer, as we do more analysis down the road, if this goes forward to final design, they'll look at the traffic, they'll look at the volumes, they'll look at the timing. Maybe we would totally advocate anything that comes out of our plan. We want DOT to look into. We want them to do, and incorporate that in the final design too. So what I'm hearing is hawk signals at both for a multitude, but different reasons, right? And that way we can have a progressive controlled signal system in the entire length of the corridor. And the reason for that, and this is the analogy I like using, right now, people are going 50 miles an hour along this corridor. In fact, everybody that owns a pair of keys on this call has broken the speed limit on 15th Street. Raise your hand if you don't think you have, and I'll call you out in a heartbeat. Exactly. Come on, Grace. You have done it.
Maybe a little tiny bit, but I'm a slow driver anyway.
All right, Betsy. No.
I don't speed. I'm a pedestrian planner.
No way. No way. I don't believe it. Anyway, all kidding aside, so if it's posted 6:45 and people are going 50 or 55, even 60 miles an hour, which happens, we heard that from the chief of police. If say we want to make this a slower speed, and we get that, and we build in some traffic calming like we're talking about. What if we were to post it 35 miles an hour? Now, hear me out. The only way to control speed is through redesign. So if we post it for 35 miles an hour and we have a progressive control signal system, meaning all the signals are coordinating and talking to each other, right? And if someone decides, and it's 40, 35, and it's all programmed for 35 miles an hour, if you go 50 miles an hour, then you're going to hit 80% of the time, you're going to hit stoplights and you're going to be stopping at the signals. But if you go 35 miles an hour or 40, 80% of the time you hit green balls. You will hit green signals. That's the whole premise behind the progressive controlled signal system. I think that's pretty profound. We can almost train these drivers to do the speed limit if they want to continually move. And I think that's pretty powerful. So that's going to be beyond our design, but more of our policy, Betsy, more of our policy and operational improvement recommendations as we move forward.
Does that address, I heard Michael Tahaney's question earlier about what the changes to 15th Street how that would affect the thoroughfare usage of 15th. And if 15th Street becomes less of a quick thoroughfare, how does that affect 264? And I was curious about hearing what would happen there. I wonder if this progressive controlled signal concept will that help some, because people can still go through but they cannot speed through? I don't know. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, no, that is a great point, and it's very valid. So if you think about it, think about GPS and how prevalent that's being used by the traveling public, especially the folks that want to go through your community to the coastal and get to their rental for the weekend or for the week. Those people, yeah, they may stop for gas, they may stop for a sandwich, but we don't want those folks speeding through your community. So right now, if your GPS tells you to go through 15th, which I think for the most part it is, we can redesign this to slow it down, because what happens in this GPS world is all about this. It's all about the cell phone. And when you have your cell phone on, it's continuously pinging your cell phone to see how far you're going, and it can calculate your speed. And so that's when Waze, the platform app Waze or the Google Maps, and they tell you, get me from A to B and take me the fastest travel time. That's going to pull you right through 15th Street. So if we can redesign and slow down the traffic and even do it for 35 miles an hour, some of that traffic is going to go away. The through traffic shouldn't be using 15th Street to do that. It really should not be. It should be using a US route to get from A to B, like 264. The good news is you have a wonderful grid network. And number two, you have multiple ways of getting through your community. What we're advocating is just slow down cars enough. But I think we can design enough, Betsy, to shift where people are going to. Most of them are going to stay there because this is a destination corridor. But some of them may choose to elect to use 264 rather.
Is it partly a peak hour travel problem? Because I live 2 blocks from 264, and a lot of the time it's practically empty, no problem, very little traffic. I've taken pictures of it where there's no cars in either direction, but that's like 10 in the morning, 2:30 in the afternoon. At 9 a.m. or 7 or 8 a.m. or at 5:30 p.m., then of course it's congested, but we can't always solve the peak hour problem at the expense of the rest of the day, right? So
Yep.
what are you guys doing about, I mean, what's your thinking on the 15th Street project? What's your thinking about that peak hour? Yeah, oh, it's a terribly congested road. Yeah, for 1 hour here and 1 hour there. What have you got going on in your minds about that issue?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Hillsborough Street, which went through the same thing. It was 4 lanes and it's down to 2 lanes, in fact, with parking and bike lanes. So, and that was been in place for 15 years. And it had more traffic than what you guys had too at the time too. So twofold, Betsy, to answer your question. Number one, I don't see the need for folks to take using 15th Street as a throughway. If they're trying to go through your community, use US 264 to do that. And I think Ned's, nodding to that as well. So that's one premise. And we can certainly do that through coordinating the signals, number one, and then designing traffic calming like the roundabout, number two, and the use of median pockets, number two. So we're gonna redesign it to slow down traffic. We're gonna program the signals to slow down traffic. And so when someone puts that GPS map and says, get me to the coast, A to B, and I'm coming from Greenville, fastest route possible, we want them to take 264. Now, beyond that, and I can't tell you what's more prevalent during off-peak or peak hour, how much through traffic is being used, because I don't have a travel demand model for this area. But I will say this, if we do that, our premise is to really redesign it and make through traffic less desirable on 15 and let 264, what its intended purpose to carry that load. Between all your network though, primarily those 2 facilities, you have plenty of capacity to handle that. The last thing is peak hour. Peak hour, you have a destination, so a corridor. So if we reduce anything, you're probably gonna see a reduction of maybe 2,000 vehicles a day along there is my guess, was what the through trip traffic on there. I don't think it's a huge amount, but I think, because it's a destination corridor, in other words, live, work, play, office, medical, shopping, food line, all of that is on there. It's a destination corridor. You're still going to see a heavy load of traffic. Rightfully so. I mean, it's an attractive corridor. That's most of your retail and commercial property in Little Washington. So it's going to be a destination corridor.
Okay.
That's awesome. Good stuff. All right. Dan, what are we missing here? And any folks, feel free to chime in. I think folks have to head on. Ned agrees with Laura. Let me see the chat box here. Make sure we got this. They have to run. Oh, okay. If they use 264, they are affecting fewer neighborhoods. Good point. I agree with Laura. Good point, and I agree. All right, no, you're spot on. What have we forgotten? And I'll let you guys, I know we're a little bit over time, but is there anything that you want to remind us to make sure we incorporate into the design or you haven't heard this yet? Anything? Grace?
Yeah, I was just thinking that I don't know that we have talked about neighborhoods some, but I just didn't want it to get lost that this was kind of what we were doing is focusing on the neighborhood situation. So that's all. Just all of this stuff does affect the neighborhoods, and just want to be sure that that is something that comes out of this.
Awesome. Yeah, and Michael chimed in. I'll just read that real quick and then get back to Grace's comment. If the Hawks are linked into the light timing, I concur with the proposal. Oh, okay, awesome. Thanks, Michael. And so Grace, yeah, that's a good point. What I would suggest is this, and it's really interesting. The southern tier of the southern area south of 15th Street, if you think of that east to west, that is a great grid network of neighborhood streets. And I think that's wonderful. On the north side, not so much. In fact, you have so much, disconnect up there. If you think about all the roads, and let me grab my screen here, Dan. But if you think, and then you let me know what you can see. Yeah, can you see this aerial? Yes, no? Okay. So here we are on 15th Street. All of this wonderful network of neighborhood streets down here. But up here, not so much. In fact, everything you have is a dead-end street for the most part, especially when you get west of Market, right? I'll zoom in. This is a great example of poor planning. And Betsy, I hate to say it, I'm not going to point a finger at you, but just collectively as a group, we need to do a better job than this. Look at this. You have a dead-end cul-de-sac here, and you have the neighborhood, multifamily here, and it's not connected, even though you have dead-end streets here and dead-end streets here. So we got to do a good job of interconnectivity when this parcel develops, and not continue to do this. Also, all of this feeds into 15th Street. All of this, which is the Washington Plaza, feeds in there. All of these roads right here are dead-end cul-de-sacs, all of them. This doesn't connect to this street, which doesn't connect to this street, which doesn't connect to this. That means all of the development north of 15th Street, for every trip that comes into and out of these homes and out of these businesses, has to get onto 15th Street. And there is the rub. That is the problem. We've got to do a much better job of requiring cross-access between complementary uses. There's no reason why this tractor supply can't connect over to here, which can't connect over to Washington's Plaza and make the connections. There's no reason that we have these connection of these streets and not having connection between these adjacent parcels. And so on a regulatory side, on a policy side, we'll make some recommendations to help Jonathan, Aaron, and Betsy make better decisions about development and redevelopment. I think, Betsy, you chimed in on that earlier today with the economic development folks, that we've got to work better with them to require some of these stub outs and making these connections more of a reality. That's good. So what we want to do is what we call pedestrian sleeves, right? And really make sure that we're connecting these neighborhoods and giving them good opportunity to cross 15th Street and providing opportunities to come up to all this commercial and go east and west along here too. So we will enhance the pedestrian sleeves. I call them pedestrian sleeves because they connect the neighborhoods to the commercial corridor and vice versa. And that's our premise there. We want to make it safe, Grace, for people to get through their community and into the commercial corridor. All right. I think we're running out of time here. Any other last minute thoughts here? And if not, but please continue to be with us this evening. And tomorrow's going to be a grand finale at 5 p.m. But we appreciate your time. If you have anything else you want to share with us, please forward it to Aaron, Dan, myself, Betsy, or Jonathan. Ned, did you want to say something, sir?
I like the direction you're headed. Thanks.
Awesome, Ned. Thank you. Everybody else, are we good? Awesome. All right. Have a wonderful afternoon. Please enjoy your lunch and we'll see you later on this evening. Take care.